I should have said this, but it's okay. I'll tell you when I did my proof of work file, I did add, and this is something I want you to get used to because I'm going to require it going forward, is that you put just short statements and using the print in your query file to say what this is, right? So just these are static queries, and now we're going to write a subquery. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment that out because I now have that in the proof of work, right? I could even comment this out because I've already put it in the proof of work, so to know that that comes next. Not a big deal. But now I'm going to come back here. Okay, so now you're going to learn how to take these three queries and write one subquery that's dynamic. Okay, and the way and Carter's going to talk about this process of how you write these queries. I'm just going to tell you it's it's good experience to understand the way they execute, and I'll talk about that a little bit in here. So what you do is this will be where we ultimately want to have something come back, right? We want to know who wrote the well. So in this case, when I've written it like this, when we write the subquery, it'll be in reverse order. We'll start with this query, okay? So I'm going to make my life a little easier. I'm going to copy this one, okay? Come here. Now, in this case, because we want to have the result of another query be the answer to what we're looking for, right? So where the author, right, the author's ID equals. So we don't want to, we want to actually run. And in this case, you're going to see this, and I'm going to get rid of the semicolon here. Okay, so here now, and this is a common thing in programming, where we have now, in this case, a command that's going to run to give us this answer. When this answer, and you'll see the query here in a minute, comes back, ultimately, and you won't see this, what will come back is 13. Okay, but what we do is we run a subquery. Now I'm going to hit enter here, and my editor is going to make my life easier by already indenting, like you will see Carter do in there. He'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's why I like writing them in here and then pasting them in to my terminal just to see how it works, because I may, again, it's just a much better editor. So now we're going to say, hey, now select, okay, this next one, because this is now how do we find, right, the ID as we look for, we know that what comes back from here is a book ID, where the book ID is 2, okay? So then we need to find this, okay? So in here, now we're going to run another query, okay? So what we have now, right, is we have, well, we'll come back here, and then we have another query that executes, okay, but that will be what comes back as a result. So we're actually doing a subquery, 3 queries deep. We're writing one query that's going to replace that. Okay, so what's important is to understand the execution. So let me finish this up, and then we'll talk specifically about the execution, because we know now ultimately what we want to find, right, is what is here, is select, okay? And so I'm going to come here, I'm going to do this, because this is ultimately what we want to find out, okay? And this is where I'd put the semicolon here. Now, this is what is important to understand, that, when you do an open parentheses, you do a closed parentheses, and then you have a nested parentheses. So what this means is the innermost is going to execute, and what will come back, right, is when we select, in this case, star, and we'll talk about that in a minute, right? Because I wanted to kind of transition from the static to the subquery, right? That what we were looking for, because we know we saw it in the answer, right? But let's just go ahead now. So what comes back is a value. Then we run this with that returned value. And in this case, returned value is a very common thing we talk about in programming. And so once this returns, then we come back with the return value that ultimately answers our question. Okay? All right, so let me go ahead, copy this, come down here. I'm going to clear my shell. Okay? And I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to get an error. Okay, and I expected this error. Okay, and the reason is that notice how up here, right, we were actually telling it a specific value that we were using, right, in the next query. And because I've selected all here, right, this is where I have to be specific about what I want returned. Okay, so in this case, let's actually kind of think about what it is we need. Because here's the problem. This error is indicating something that is kind of hard, and this is part of what, when you learn to write code, these error messages can be like so challenging at the beginning, and it's not uncommon to have people go out to ChatGPT and understand what they're telling you. Not necessarily a bad step. But in this case, understanding what the query is doing, right, will help you troubleshoot it. Because I wrote it as bring me back everything from that table. What really I need to do is specify what you're going to bring back, because when this return value comes back from the well, right, from querying the title, it's going to bring back, like I showed you before, that entire record. And all I really want is what? I want the ID. That's really all I want there. Okay, so in this case, right, let's look at it. So on the authored, and actually that wasn't the best example because that's actually here on this one. What I wanted was the ID itself. Okay, let me show you that just so it's a little more clear. Is this ID right here? I only needed this column to come back. So let's do that, right? So instead of bringing everything back, let's do the ID. And in this case, in the authored, instead of bringing everything back, what do we need? Again, look at the table. We only need, on the authored, is down here, right? Because we now have that, we have the book ID. Now we're going to search, we want the author ID, okay, here. So we come back here and we do author, okay? So author ID or authors, and this can author ID, okay? From authored, where your book ID is equal to what came back here. Okay, now let's test. Okay, so now we test and we get the answer, which is awesome, right? So let's go ahead and we're gonna do a couple more steps. We're almost done, right? So in this case, now that we have this, right, what do? We run our, right, we have our query, we have our subquery, one query, executes this, returns what value, right? Select, we know the book ID is 2, right? And then we pass 2, select equal to 2 here, and we know that returns 13, and then 13 ultimately is what ends up here. So this is what executes first, and then the return value is plugged into this query, the return value is plugged into here. You can think of it in that way. All right, so let's go ahead and do our proof of work. So come back over here. Let's see, am I ready to do my proof of work? I think I am, right? So in my, here, let's see, I got that and that and that. Cool, all right? So now, yep, I got it all. Actually, since I already had that in mind, you can leave it in there, but I'm gonna take it out. It probably is gonna look a little funky because it's gonna have this on the bottom, but that's okay. And then I'm gonna up arrow, I'm gonna run that. Cool. I then should be able to go over to my attendance and see that one output, right? Ultimately, what took us 3 static queries here, we got it in one step. It's dynamic. Now, let me show you what dynamic means, and then we'll finish up with this example for attendance. Let's go over to our table. So let's say now I want to do this same thing, but for time shelter. So I'm going to select time shelter, right? I'm going to come back over here, right? I'm going to leave. Now, actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this query. I'm going to copy it first. I'm going to comment it out. I'm now going to come here, and instead of well, I'm going to say, uh-oh, bad form, because I'd copied out that other one, right? Time shelter, cool, right? So now I would say maybe print, right? another subquery example. Okay. So now that I have that in there, oh yeah, what did I forget to do? Well, I haven't. Actually, you'll do the Git workflow in a minute. So we'll do this. Oh, by the way, remember, this is so important. I almost didn't do it. Copy this, come down to here, run this, and see if that gives you the output. Cool. Now you could trace it back to make sure it was true, but in this case we've moved from a static query to a dynamic query to where all we have to provide it is that newly updated title. And this is really, you know, the idea of a dynamic subquery. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead here. Now over here, I'm going to run my proof of work. I'm going to make sure in my here. Cool, there it is, right? So now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to do my, and I wasn't doing this with you before, but we'll just end up here, git commit -m, right? Video 3, right? And git push. Okay, so what will happen now is in your, I'll have one other thing here. I'll give this a little thought now, and I'll have something I want you to reply with. But remember, you do not have to reply with your commit history. That's part of what I will review when I review your work, because nobody will see it. Remember, we're working in the private repos. And by the way, good thing to do is to always stop my code space when I'm done with it, so I'm not taking up time. I hope you all checked yours last week. All right, look for the last thing you need to do here. Talk to you later.